the MVP race, especially these past 2 weeks, we've seen the odds go absolutely up and down like the stock exchange in New York. You have Drake May falling a little bit. You got Josh Allen rising up, Matthew Stafford down and up and down. When it comes to the MVP race for you guys, and I think a lot of people are saying Matthew Stafford's probably number one. And then in some order, it's maybe Drake May, Josh Allen. When you look at the MVP race for you, who are your top candidates? Who is your winner as of now?
I would say it goes Matthew Stafford, then Josh Allen. And I think it's going to be Matthew Stafford, just because he's been consistently good all year and just how dominant their team's been. I think with Josh Allen, he's had to put the team on his back in a lot of ways, and I think that would help him out for the MVP. I think Drake May's been really good, but I think that loss against the Bills is going to hurt him in getting that award. But I think it's not a huge deal. It's his second year. So I think it's Stafford, though, if I was going to pick someone right now.
Yeah, I'd agree with you too. I don't think Josh Allen is too far behind, but Drake May had a really solid case to solidify himself as a top or top two contender with that win. With that win, they would have been the first team in the league to win their division, would have ended the Bills' 5-year win streak of the AFC East title. But he only had 155 passing yards, his lowest of the season, his first game under 200 yards. He had 2 rushes, touchdowns. I'll give him his credit there, but no passing touchdowns through the air. So really kind of had a chance to solidify himself if he would have had a better second half and got the ball moving and really just got the win overall. You know, the wins mean more than anything, but really just kind of let that slip from his hands and kind of let Josh Allen sneak into maybe that 2-3 spot. It's arguable, but I think Matthew Stafford, like you said, is probably the clear number one as of now. And with the solid last 3 weeks, especially this game on Thursday, that's really going to be the big determiner. Because if they were to lose against the Seahawks, maybe he has a rough game, or maybe they just lose in a nail biter. Regardless, they would slip from the number 1 seed to the 5 seed probably. So a huge chance for Matthew Stafford to solidify himself this week, coming off a big win versus former team, the Lions. But when we get into kind of teams that we might be pretty good, might be pretty bad, it's time to put these teams through the fraud test. And we'll start in the AFC. Pick one team from the AFC right now, just off the top of your head. One team in the AFC that you think is a fraud, and give me your reasoning why you think this team is probably going to be a one and done in the playoffs.
I'd say Steelers.
And how come?
Their history. I mean, they have Aaron Rodgers, and they're kind of the same team as they were last year. I feel like we talk about the Steelers the same way we do every year. And I just don't think it's going to be anything different this year. I think if it's going to be different, it's not going to be because of Mike Tomlin or the defense. It's going to be because of Aaron Rodgers.
All right, let's take it over to the NFC side then. Same thing. What is one team that in the NFC that scares you? One team that you think might be a fraud and is going to be a one and done in the playoffs?
I think I would say Tampa, but I feel like that's a little too obvious. But I think Philly, just because of how inconsistent they are, it kind of reminds me of the 2023 season where they started off really good and end up did not do well in the playoffs. First year after a Super Bowl teams usually do not perform as well. And they've kind of been inconsistent. I know they beat the Raiders a lot, but when you're starting Kenny Pickett and your whole team is given up and you fired your OC, I don't think that's really that impressive of a win.
I know there's been a lot of chatter about Nick Sirianni. You know, some people in the media say, this guy needs to get fired. And coming off a Super Bowl, a team that's going to make the playoffs, going to probably win their division, maybe be a 2-3 seed. It's a little chaotic and a little crazy to kind of start throwing them in the pressure cooker that fast. But when it comes to the coaching, we're nearing the end of the season. We've had a few coaches be fired, like Brian Callahan in Tennessee, Brian Dable up in New York. There's a few coaches and even a few quarterbacks that right now they know that every snap that they're taking matters. They're really putting up film for their owners, their GMs on, are we going to keep this guy? Some decisions have already been made. Some decisions, maybe the GMs are going to look at these last few weeks to really see if this is a guy that's going to remain on a roster or if we're going to cut him, waive him, trade him. I want you to pick one coach that you think is going to be canned at the end of the year, and maybe not a more obvious one, but one that you think is the most interesting change in coaching that is going to happen at the end of this season.
I think the obvious one would be Stefanski on the Browns, even though they haven't fired him yet. I think one that would be interesting would be Aaron Glenn, and the reason I say that's interesting is because they have a new GM and and he's a first-year coach. But this has happened. First-year coaches have got fired, and the Jets have been an absolute dumpster fire this year. They've already had 3 different starting quarterbacks. They fired their defensive coordinator, who is established in the league for a long time. And it's just clearly dysfunctional over there. I think that's one that I could see that's kind of interesting. I think the other candidate that you'd kind of bring up would be Pete Carroll, just because everything there is it's just a mess. I mean, Pete Carroll's been good everywhere he's been except the Raiders.
No, that's a fair point. It'd be really surprising to see a one and done in Pete Carroll, especially coming off, Tom Brady authorizing that and really ownership taking a massive swing at bringing this guy in to really establish the culture. Same thing for Aaron Glenn, a guy that was brought in to establish culture. Seeing Steve Wilkes fired and kind of blaming that on him, I don't really know if that's fair. There can just be a lack of talent that causes defenses to be bad. Defense needs more talent. They don't have a quarterback that can necessarily carry more of a load and elevate a team like a defense can, unless you maybe have a Myles Garrett like Stefanski does down there in Cleveland. But I want to ask you the same question, but when it comes to quarterbacks, a quarterback that you think is probably not going to be on their team next year, maybe the most interesting quarterback that you think is not going to be on their current roster next year.
That's a really good question. I think I got 3 that kind of really stick out to me. Geno Smith, Justin Fields, and Tua. I think those are just really interesting because a lot of those quarterbacks, those teams made multi-year commitments to. Those aren't 1-year starters. That was not the design of their contracts. But I don't think you can realistically start those guys next year on opening day, like the opening week of the season, and be like, yeah, these guys are our guys after you've already benched them, after they've already struggled this much, especially when you're trying to keep the new coaches, especially if these coaches are trying to keep their jobs. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with them, because I don't think they're guys that you can they're expensive, and I don't think you want to just cut them. But I also don't think you want to start them either.
No, that's a very fair point. I'll pose you this question in response to that. So you look at a team like, let's say the Raiders, they got Geno, like you mentioned, the Jets, the Dolphins. The Dolphins draft pick isn't going to be as high as the other 2 teams, but maybe this is more so for the Raiders and for the Jets. Do you think that these teams are going to draft a quarterback with their high first round pick? That's probably both of these teams are going to be drafting in the top 10, maybe even top 5.
I think the Raiders and the Jets will. I think the way the draft is set up right now and the way their teams are going to finish out, I think it's going to be between the Raiders and the Jets. I think they're going to be the 2 teams with the worst records, and I think both of them are going to get a quarterback. So one will get Mendoza, the other's going to get Dante Moore. I think Cleveland's going to miss out, and they'll probably ride through Shedeur and just ride the Shedeur Sanders train for another year. I think that could be entertaining. I think with the Dolphins, though, I think you brought up, I don't think they're going to be able to draft a quarterback right away. I think if anything, it may be a tank season. Kind of like what the Bengals did with Andy Dalton back in 2019. And then Miami's not going to get a guy until the year after, because I don't think this quarterback class is that deep for first-round talent if you're going to get a guy in the first round. Like, I think unless you're a top 3 pick or a top 4 pick, I don't think you're going to get a quarterback that you want.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you. But going back to the playoff picture, there's a few teams that this week, if they win, maybe a few losses by another teams, they have a chance to make the playoffs in week 16. Again, 3 weeks from the playoffs, they have a chance to solidify themselves. We'll start in the AFC. The New England Patriots, like mentioned earlier, they will face the Ravens on Sunday Night Football. And if the Texans lose their game earlier in the day, the Patriots with a win could win a playoff spot, not the division, but win at least a playoff chance. And that's if the Texans lose to the Raiders, which you don't expect to happen. But I want to know, for these different situations that I'm about to bring up, what do you think are the chances that this happens? So we'll start like the one I just mentioned. Patriots beat the Ravens and the Texans lose to the Raiders. How likely is this?
I don't think it's likely at all. I think it's 0 to 10%, unless some crazy stuff happens in Houston and the stadium burns down. I think that the Texans are going to win that game.
All right, that's fair. All right, how about this one? The Eagles have to beat the Commanders to win their division this weekend. How likely is that?
100%. I'm going 100%. I'm going 100%. I believe that they will take the division, but they will also possibly lose pretty early in the playoffs.
100 is crazy. I mean, it is any given Sunday. That's the transition, but
okay, maybe not 100. I'll go 80. 80. That's a little disrespectful to Washington. And Marcus Mariota seems like a nice guy, so I'm gonna give it 80% Eagles.
That's fair. Those are the only ones that I know of. There might be some crazy mathematical ones where it's possible, but when you look at the NFC playoff picture, it's an absolute nightmare with how close the teams are. You know, the Lions are still scrapping in. The Panthers still got the chance to win their division with their 2 games against the Buccaneers coming up. It's really just chaotic. And then, I mean, the NFC West in general, you got the 10-4 49ers and the 11-3 Seahawks, 11-3 Rams. Just an absolute nightmare situation, but it really, really could have a decent chance, especially if the Seahawks win, for the 49ers to kind of sneak up in there. But that's enough talking about these crazy playoffs. I mean, that we've talked about the playoffs so much that we need to get into a new topic, and that is quarterback trustworthiness. We've seen from Bo Nix, he's had some massive games this year, and then we've seen from other weeks, like Drake May has a big matchup this week, doesn't really come through with that. I think there's a few quarterbacks that you could say that you really trust this year. I think Josh Allen, maybe Matthew Stafford, Bo Nix, but outside of those 3 names, are there any other quarterbacks that you truly trust in the league?
I trust Purdy a lot.
Okay.
I think he's played really – I mean, look in his career, unless he's injured, he's going to be really, really solid. This is going to sound kind of odd, but I have a certain level of trust with Aaron Rodgers. Just because he's Aaron Rodgers, and I think, yeah, he's not the same, but he's still Aaron Rodgers. The one that I have that's probably going to throw things off a little bit is I have a lot of trust in Caleb Williams. Wow. And the reason I say that is because, I mean, I know I'm biased, but the guy's clutch, right? He's not – the issue with Caleb Williams, I think, is he's not as consistent as he should be. But when the moment's big, he shows up and he makes good plays. The only time I haven't really seen him do that was that last game against the Packers. But even then, he led them down the field. It was just one stupid play. He just anticipated badly where Kmet was going to be. So I'd probably stick with those ones. I'm trying to think who else may possibly be that I trust a lot.
How about Jared Goff? Wow, Baker, really? What has Baker done in the last few weeks to earn your trust? Because he's really gone downhill as the season's gone on. I think he's battling through injury. You can cut him some slack there. But he started off the first 4 or 5 weeks, MVP candidate, maybe top of that, and is really just kind of fallen off a cliff. And he's gotten some receivers back. You know, Ibuka isn't playing his best. Mike Evans comes back. And we just cannot see them win the game. We cannot see Baker Mayfield really shine. How come you trust Baker Mayfield?
I trust Baker Mayfield just because of his experience. I think, like you said it, I think he's injured right now. But I think the way he's wired, I trust him. The other guy that I have a lot of trust in, I think, is I'm going to go with – I mean, Matthew Stafford doesn't count, right? Because they're guaranteed to be in it.
All right, I'll pose you one. How about Jared Goff? What's your trust level with Jared Goff?
I think he's a regular season warrior. I think he plays really good. He has good stats. He's a good quarterback. But I don't know if I trust him during the biggest moments unless he's playing the Rams.
And they just came off a loss versus the Rams too.
Yeah, but in the playoffs, though, he plays well against them.
It's true. It's true. The Lions are not having their best year, but I don't think they're a team that is awful, to say the least. I think, no one really wants to face them, especially just how much talent they have. But their secondary, man, with Brian Branch's injury, their secondary is obsolete. It's really just no issue. If you can withstand the pass rush from Aiden Hutchinson and the front 7, you really have all day to kind of let your receivers get open. It's almost like everyone playing against that secondary is like Tyreek Hill back in his prime days. They're open by 5 yards. So we can move on to the next topic as it pertains to the Super Bowl and who is going to make it all the way. If you had to pick your safest pick on who you believe is going to make the Super Bowl, one team in the NFL, your life is on the line. The aliens are pointing the gun at you. Who is going to the Super Bowl?
It's either the Rams, in my opinion, or the Niners.
It's hard for me as much as I have respect for the Niners, and I think they're a sneaky team to make the NFC Conference Championship game. I just think with the injury to Joey Bosa and Fred Warner, I don't know if I can trust them to go to the Super Bowl. I think they have the talent on the offensive side of the ball. They have a phenomenal coach, a phenomenal defensive coordinator with Saleh. But with the injuries to two of your best players on defense, I just don't see this team going to the Super Bowl. I think their ceiling is the NFC Championship game. But I really think that through what the injuries that they've gone through, with having Mac Jones in there for like 5 weeks, they've really gotten the most out of their players. And I think they've done a phenomenal job. But I mean, the injuries, the star players, the leadership that's been injured, it's really hard for me to say that they've gone to. But I do respect that. And I think the Rams, like you said, if anyone had to pick, they're probably going to pick the Rams or the Broncos. Obviously, it's the 1 seed. They've done the most to prove it. But who knows in the AFC? The AFC is really up for anyone. I mean, the Bills, too, the way they've been playing, if they continue to dominate the way they have these past few weeks, and just overcome those hiccups, I think we very well could see them finally representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. If you enjoyed the show, smash the subscribe button here on YouTube. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the Fifth Quarter Media. We'll be back after week 17 when things really start to lock in, just ahead of the final regular season week. Appreciate you all for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.